everybody. Welcome to another spooky comic episode of Games My Mom Found. I am Mike Albertin, and who's with me tonight?
I am the walking nightmare, Kenneth Sanity.
And I murdered my brother to be here, Chris Dobson.
And Chris, where do people know you from?
I have a couple of podcasts. I was with you on some of my friends read comics, and I also have a bad movie podcast called Your Stupid Mind.
Oh, okay. And there will be a link to both of those in the show notes that you will see if you look. And before we get too far, I just want to say that we will be talking about murder and serial killers and a little bit about pedophiles and things like that. We're going to get some dark subjects. We've just been warned, so also listen to this with headphones, but just want to put that out there before we get too far. All right. Kenneth, since this is completely your pick that I would not have put on the show otherwise, why don't you tell me what we're talking about today?
So today we are going to be covering the second full volume of the Sandman series, The Dollhouse.
Yeah. Which is fucked up as hell.
Oh, it's so good.
It is good. It's just I was not expecting it when I came into this. So I haven't read Sandman for, at this point, almost 2 years. We read the first Sandman arc, which I will be plugging in the episode. And I don't remember a whole lot. I just remember I liked it. So when you mentioned this, I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do the second, let's do another volume of Sandman. We might as well. I should cover more on this show. And I was not, I didn't remember a whole lot, but I was not expecting, the first issue of this, because this Dollhouse arc kind of starts in issue 9, which came out in 1989. And it doesn't have anything to do with the later story. It's really just a fill-in arc for a completely later arc for some reason, but it's all part of this volume still, which I guess it's just more history on the Sandman himself.
Right.
I don't know.
I'd beg to differ. I think it is a pretty appropriate issue for the kind of getting into the idea of what's going on here, but
Yeah. I mean, there's some theme stuff that ties into the ending of this story, but I mean, yeah, it doesn't directly have really anything to do with it. It's kind of a Orpheus kind of thing. We should also mention, since your last episode on Sandman came out, the video game Hades came out, and I feel like everybody's sort of knowledge of all of these sort of chthonic entities has gone up like 1,000,000%. Where you're like, oh, of course, I know these characters. So when you're like, oh, this is a real Morpheus story, people are like, oh, of course, Morpheus.
Oh, he's in the Hades?
Or Orpheus,
not
I
this
guess.
character, but I mean...
yeah.
Okay.
It's more of a
kind of
reverse
had
Orpheus, because, she goes to hell.
Mm-hmm. And in Hades, you're basically trying to fight your way out of hell.
But you learn about the sort of complicated relationships between all of these immortal and also sort of, like I said, the beings that are not quite gods that are in Hades, like Night and what's his name? The guy that's in the sort of weird dimension where it's
Chaos.
Yes, Chaos, where it's like you've got these other kinds of characters that aren't quite in the sort of normal orbit, and they have certain rules that they have to follow and these things that they can and can't do. And so this, that first story kind of touches on that, where they're like, he's not quite a god. He's got different things that make him separate from a god.
And this story goes more into, this arc, more into the other characters. I know we start off with Delirium and Desire pretty early, because I know we see Death at the end of the first arc with Morpheus, because Morpheus is the Sandman who's in control of all the dreaming.
And interestingly enough, when the Dollhouse was first published, it started with the story The Sound of Her Wings also.
Which one was The Sound of Her?
That was the story with Morpheus and Death from the end of the first volume.
Okay, I vaguely remember that. Okay.
Yeah, that was the first original printing of the Dollhouse had that story, but later issues started it with the issue 9, the story of Nada and Morpheus.
Okay, which makes sense because I had originally, when you first mentioned this, I thought Death was going to be in this arc because it ends with Death at the end of the first arc. So I'm like, okay, this arc will be about Death. Not at all, but that was my guess coming into this. It did not. Yeah. Prove to be true.
Yeah, Death doesn't even really appear at all, does she? Or
no.
Does it or whatever? But
Death does appear.
It seems like it would at the end.
Yeah, Death kind of shows up, but in a weird side story that doesn't have a lot to do with the main narrative thrust of this.
That's true. But yeah, that's a one-off that I'm not. I was thinking more at the end of this story, someone does die, but death doesn't show up for them.
No,
That's
a weird. We'll get there. I don't think there's a whole lot to say about issue 9, but is that Cain and Abel in that one scene? They talk about the two brothers who killed themselves.
Yeah, that was the reference I was making earlier.
Okay.
Just so the police, I know everyone listening, immediately call the police. I was referencing that scene.
Yeah, it's really 100 people to listen to this. So.
Well, I don't want to be swatted by 100 people. Yes, it's Cain and Abel, who, again, this is where the DC comic stuff I didn't know when I first read this. They hosted, they hosted a horror anthology series for DC Comics. I think, was it House of Mystery? It was they had like 5 different mystery anthologies, but one of them was Cain and Abel.
Oh, that's good. That's something I didn't know. That's kind of cool. I never followed a lot of DC comics until more recently.
Right. I had never read, 70s and 60s DC comics at the time, so I had no idea when I read this. But later I found out, like, oh, these are existing DC. I mean, he's doing a very clever thing where he's fitting all this into the DC universe in ways that aren't immediately apparent, but when you're paying attention, you're like, oh, wow. So yeah, House of Mystery, and is that the only one? But yeah, that was 1968 is their Cain and Abel's first DC Comics appearance.
Okay, so he does pull. I know, like in the first arc, you had Martian Manhunter for a very small scene. You had Constantine. This, you don't really have any of that, I guess, other than I think the Cain and Abel thing.
Well, that's we'll get to it, but not true.
Nothing jumps out.
There's actually a lot of tie-ins.
Yeah, it's funny because, like I said, on a reread, I was like, there are tie-ins I did not get at all on the first read. So that's what's fun about rereading something like this.
I didn't get.
Gaiman is clearly like a fan of classic DC comics, but he's also like doing this kind of meta narrative stuff that he likes to do.
I think the only other thing to mention about I want to wrap up issue 9 quick so we can get into the main arc. I guess the whole idea is that Morpheus fell in love with somebody, and you wouldn't even know it's Morpheus because he looks completely different, which I like because he looks like someone from that culture and from that time, except for the weird ass alien helmet. That's how you know it's Morpheus. It's still a fucked up story. Like the whole fact that he falls in love with a mortal who won't love him back because she knows that it'll only end terribly for her, and then like it's just so fucking weird. Yeah, I mean, like Park takes a knife and cuts herself, and it's a fucked up little story. I don't know if you have anything else you want to say.
I feel like the most important part of this is one sentence in issue 9. Love belongs to desire, and desire is always cruel. That one line sets up most of this run immediately afterwards.
Right.
Okay.
And the frame story is you're in this like desert, and this these two people are telling the story, and they find like a shard of glass, and then it's kind of heart shaped, and so that kind of ties in with the ending, which I thought was very cool. So there's clearly like a plan. It's not like this is just this is a one-off story that has nothing to do with it. Like this is meant to be symmetrical with the ending, even if it's not the actual same place.
Okay. As a guy who only read this once, it didn't make a lot of sense to me, but okay. So it was just kind of, I was just like, what the fuck?
Yeah, from a plot standpoint, it doesn't really have that much to do with what we're about to go into, but it is sort of setting up. These are the themes. These are some of the even settings that you're going to see, but without saying like, this is, kind of what it's about. I think it's really clever and really, I mean, we're the first people to say Sandman is good here in 2020.
Oh, yes, clearly.
Good storytelling.
Hey, as a guy who just finally read this arc in 2021, and yeah, I mean, hey, there are people out there who never experienced Sandman.
But they're all going to get the chance now because there's been the Audible audio novel that came out where James McAvoy is voicing Morpheus. And that pretty much, I think, tells the story of Preludes and Nocturnes.
Yeah.
There is a volume 2 coming out soon. There's also the Netflix show, which is going to be coming. There's a lot of Sandman coming in the future.
And it's weirdly still not on DC's, whatever their unlimited equivalent is called, Infinity, I think. It's
Really?
not on there, which is weird. But you can find a copy at literally every local library you go to. I would be shocked if they don't have a copy of Sandman. Like, I feel like it's been a fixture even before, like, libraries really started collecting comics.
That was the first way I read the entire run, actually, was my local library had all 12 volumes.
Yeah.
That's some fucked up stories for a library to have. But
Yeah, I mean,
That's
I know. I've been
yeah, I mean, like 741.5 back before they had like teen sections of comics was where you had to go to find these things. So yeah, let's go on to issue number 10, which is where we actually start the Doll's House proper.
which I didn't understand how this starts off. So this starts off with a character with their heart, looks like their heart showing, which is, and they keep, I want to say, which this is this is Delirium, right? That they're talking to? Or no, this is Desire.
Yeah,
Okay,
and this is a statue. This is like a large
okay.
statue.
I thought it was a person. I was really confused at this first part because I also want to say they keep saying he and she, like they keep changing who Desire is.
That's the thing. Desire is very much androgynous, non-binary, presents as both, male and female. They're basically the them pronoun before it was a thing.
Which I thought was really cool. Like I liked this. I was as much as confused I liked the scene where you see Desire walking and you see the artifacts from Morpheus, which I also thought was interesting. That stupid helmet again. Even I didn't know what the hell was going on. I thought it was very interesting.
And this is kind of Desire's world versus we've seen Morpheus's world, which is kind of like, again, it's kind of like the House of Mystery in DC Comics. He has like a spooky castle with a raven and a bunch of like little friends. And Desire is basically just by themselves, and they've got, kind of a monument to themselves, and then they've got sort of their little spooky watching, area.
It was okay. That makes more sense. I was really confused, like what was going on. I had no idea where they were, what was happening. But okay, that makes more sense now. I'm less confused.
Yeah, well, and there isn't like Stanley narration bubbles. It's like meanwhile and Desires.
Meanwhile, in the halls of justice. Yeah, no, this is really cool because the whole point of all these little totems are representative of the other endless Desire siblings. So you got the Ankh, which is death. You have the book, which is destiny. The helmet, obviously, is going to be dream. And she pulls out the fishhook ring, which I'm sure has a more appropriate name, but that's what I'm going to call it. And that's the sigil of Desire's twin, Despair.
Yeah, so I guess Buddha approves of Desire and Despair being linked together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. And you're making this make more sense to me as we're talking about it. It's making me enjoy it more because I was just so freaking confused that I didn't get what the hell was going on. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, and this is a book, there's lots of comics that are just a fun, you can read lots of Spider-Man comics where it's like, there wasn't anything you missed. You got it all. There's a lot to miss in these books on a first read.
Oh, yeah, and I missed a lot.
I was really subtext.
confused how then it jumps to a girl on a plane with her mother, Rose Walker, I think is her name. Like this, yes. I was just like so confused. Like they're going there. I think, are they looking for their brother at this point?
They don't really know why they're going to England in the first place, but okay. they're going to England because there's some kind of emergency thing. And they don't know. I guess should we talk about the kind of twist of this, or should we wait until the end? Because either way, people will be spoiled by what's happening.
I will wait to the end.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's probably best that we just take things as they come.
Okay. So Rose falls asleep and we cut to Dream as she's like seeing Dream.
So that's what
stuff.
That was. So, because like they did the comic book thing that I didn't like because I was reading this on a phone, where they like you have to read upside down or not, you have to read sideways, and I couldn't turn my comic that way. So I could have turned off the auto rotation on my phone, but okay, I wasn't sure where she was because I saw the characters that looked familiar, like vaguely remember them from the first volume. Okay, I didn't realize she was entering the dreaming with Sandman.
Right. Yeah. She's falling asleep in the car, and then because she's already having these kind of crossover dreams, and then so she's doing it again. And so, who was it? Was it, I forget which character is doing the little list of stuff that's missing, but as they're going through it, Lucian, yes, as they're going through it. So I guess we should mention the characters that are missing because they all come back. So there's Brute and Glob. So, and again, we'll talk more about them when we get to them. Then there's the Corinthian, who obviously is a pretty major character in the story. And then there's Fiddler's Green, which is, I guess, just a concept that has wandered off.
Wow, this one didn't make any sense to me. Like I was reading this, and even though I read this in a couple days, it didn't make sense. It just clicked now that the people he mentioned that are missing come back in the story. Like I had no idea that was a thing.
Yeah, I mean it's literally all of them show up by the end of this storyline.
Wasn't Glob in the first arc?
I don't think so. I
Okay,
think they're
maybe.
just I think they're well, maybe he was, but I mean they're from something else, which I'll talk about when we get to it.
Okay. Yeah, the Corinthian was I didn't notice the way he looked at first until later. Oh, they even have a little like panel for each one of these characters that are missing that come up later in this arc. Yeah, none of that clicked on me when I read this. When they talked about it later on, none of it clicked. I guess I was
And
paying attention.
there's a whole reason that Lucian is going around and doing this inventory, because in the first one, Dream was imprisoned, and now that he's back in the dreaming, he just kind of wants to make sure that everything is all set up and where it should be. But yes, as we mentioned, there are 4 entities that are missing.
So this is when Rose gets to some giant mansion in England, if I remember correctly, and the woman they meet is their grandmother. Is her grandmother?
Right.
Yes.
And she was one of the people that fell asleep from the first arc when Dream was missing, right?
Correct.
Okay. If I remember correctly, there's one woman that they like focus on that I thought had got pregnant and had a kid while she's sleeping, which is fucked up. But I can't remember if that's what I thought maybe this was.
That's the grandmother.
That is Unity.
Okay, that's okay. And that's the one they're talking to right now in this book, right?
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Wow, I did not put that together.
And there's clues about who the father is when she goes to the giant doll's house that's in her room. There's a little figure that people think is Dream, but it's not him.
Oh no.
This whole thing, like I didn't understand what was happening. Like she sees 3 different women, a witch, blonde, and like an old woman in a wheelchair. I did not understand what was going on. Was that dreaming?
That is, I forget the proper name, but like
so in the comics they're called the Kindly Ones. In myth, they're called the Furies normally. Or
okay.
Whatever the Greek term for it is.
It's Furies. Percy Jackson taught me that too.
It starts with an E, but whatever it is, they're the thing that show up if you commit whatever crimes against your family or things of that nature. And yes, they're there. You got the mother, the crone, and I guess the good-looking one.
Yeah, the maiden, the mother, and the crone, the triple goddess that shows up a lot in a lot of neo-pagan religions.
Okay. It's just such a weird, like I was just so confused, and like when you see that giant dollhouse, that does look like Morpheus in the window. Like I think I saw it and I thought it was Morpheus. I didn't read that somebody else.
Right. Yeah, I mean I'm not spoiling
we'll get there.
It's not it's not Dream in the window.
But it's not reference to other arcs, right?
No, yeah, it's at the end of this arc you find out what's going on.
I don't know where the hell I was when I read this book.
Yeah. So yeah, and then I guess is the end of the first the end of the issue then is we find out, and I don't think it's a spoiler, but what the Corinthian's been up to, because it does say the Corinthian, so that's not a spoiler, but he's murdering people.
Okay, that's where it got a little fucked up, was this page where you see some guy who's a murderer and you see a woman that's tied up in a bathtub and about to be killed.
That's not a woman.
Yeah, that's a guy.
That's a guy? Okay.
That's a dude. Yep.
Oh, it looks okay. They're about to get killed.
Oh boy. And the best thing is that during this whole Corinthian scene, you see it play out first person, which just kind of gives you that more of an immersion in it. You're seeing things through the Corinthian's eyes. And then he takes off the glasses, and Davy, the gentleman in the tub, just says, "Oh no, no, oh no." And then you see the knife.
Yeah, that's when I was like, okay, what the fuck are we reading?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is the horror element. I will say the Corinthian is like my least favorite part of all those. Like, it's a little much.
And the Corinthian is my most favorite part of this. So good choice of guests here, Mike.
Like even cover 2, that's when I was kind of like, because it looks like a guy with hooks stabbed into him, and you have a pair of scissors just sitting on a table nearby. Like these are some really weird covers, and I'm just like, what the fuck?
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure Dave McKean did these covers.
He did at least some of them. I don't know if he did all of them.
Yeah, like this one feels like a Dave McKean cover.
I mean, he's here as an artist in the creative team.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think he did. Yeah, yeah. We didn't mention the creative team. There's a bunch of really good artists. The two that I guess jumped out to me that I recognized were Sam Keith was one, and then Chris Bachalo, who had a big Marvel career, after this, was one where I was like, oh, I recognize his early work. Where he's more cartoony than some of these other artists.
Okay, I don't read a whole lot of comics. Names never really jump out to me. I know Neil Gaiman, but that's it.
Chris Bachalo had a run on Spider-Man about 12 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that. And then he did Generation X was the thing that like I first noticed him as a kid, where it was like, oh, he has like a very distinct style where he doesn't draw people. I mean, he's kind of a cartoonist in a way where he draws people that look very distinct, which Sandman's a good book for that because Sandman's, a dream always looked very unique.
Mm-hmm. All the incarnations of Dream.
Yeah, he always has to be very extra. So yeah, let's keep going. So the issue 11 is you mentioned the cover. Now we are, I guess, meeting this cast of odd characters at Rose's.
Is this a different house that she moves into? It's not the same house she was in the earlier, right?
No, she's now in Florida.
Okay.
And Rose has come here to find her brother Jed.
Okay. I did not like the cast of characters in this house because they were just so. Like, you have Barbie and Ken, which are like a happy couple that I didn't like them. You had Zelda and what was her name? The other one,
Chantal,
who are covered in like have like dead spiders on them and stuff.
Yeah, they're wearing veils. They're very mysterious. Only Chantal talks. Zelda doesn't really speak much.
And then who's the other guy that they're introduced right here? I'm trying to find his name really fast.
Hal.
He's just like a normal guy, right? Essentially.
Hal Carter. Normal guy, drag queen.
I mean, relatively.
Yeah.
Well, normal compared to the characters you just met, because Barbie and Ken are just like way too smiling. Look like they really were. I thought it was gonna be a Barbie Ken doll came to life or something. That's all I was expecting.
Yeah.
Not what happened, but I was expecting it after reading this book.
They're a little too perfect, and there's also mention of Gilbert on the top floor.
Barbie, it's been years since I read Sandman. She does come back, right? She has like a whole storyline later, doesn't she?
I feel like she does.
Like it's sort of hinted at the end of the series where like she has basically like a He-Man type cat talk to her in a dream.
Yes.
And it's just like, oh, she's having some kind of like Narnia type story.
Yeah, I think she shows up again in A Game of You.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, so it's kind of, and then the idea we find out from either Dream or Matthew or somebody that it's like Rose is a vortex, so she's like attracting all these dreams like to her, all these weirdos, people that have like something wrong with them are like just kind of sucked into her orbit.
Okay, is that found out here?
I think it's
later.
You see Matthew looking through the window, and then later he talks to Dream about it.
Oh, okay, because you see the Raven, and this is when you get this really confused me. You get a page of In the Land of Marvelous Dreams, where you see a little kid with like a hero who's calling himself the Sandman. You see, God, what the hell are those two names? The green and purple guy?
Groot and
yes.
Yeah.
This was really weird to me. Like, I was just so confused. And then when it gets to reality and you see this kid locked up in a basement and he's peeing in the basement, and all of a sudden, there's like a line here where the smell that rises from the hole makes him gag. And I'm just like, what the fuck are we reading? And it was just, I mean, I understood what was happening. He was in this dream world. I didn't understand why some guy was calling himself Sandman.
Right. So, and again, so that's the part where if you know Bronze Age comic, you kind of know more about what's going on, because this is Jack Kirby's Sandman, Garrett Sanford, 1974 6-issue series about. I mean, it's literally. I mean, this is just from the Sandman. Let's see. He's assisted by two living nightmares named Brood and Glob, whom he releases from domed cells with the help of a magic whistle. The Sandman's main task is protecting children from nightmare monsters within their dreams, especially one young boy named Jed, who lives with his grandfather. So it's like literally that's what they're referencing. Like the little boy, the Sandman, like the costume and everything. Like it's literally this is all taking. But instead of being done in the style of Jack Kirby, it's done more in the style of like Kurt Swan Superman, where it's like very like child. Actually, I'd say even before Kurt Swan Superman, it's done more in the style of like 1920s. Like Little Nemo.
Okay.
Yeah, which is really appropriate considering that it's,
Right.
dreamy.
Nemo in Slumberland. Yeah, I get it.
Okay, and now as I'm reading this book for the second time or skimming through over talking, so this is when you have Rose is typing up a letter to her mother, and then the person that walks in, that was the person that you guys said was a drag queen?
Yes.
Yep, that's Hal.
Okay, that didn't click.
Dolly.
Okay. Okay, and then this is where then there's one little thing that I didn't either catch where she's looking at a newspaper, says local man dies in 2-car smash up or something and leaves 8-year-old son. Okay, that's the whole thing about Jed. Talks about the grandfather. Yeah. Okay. I don't know, some of this just didn't click right away. Like as we're talking about, it's making a lot more sense now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Sandman is a weird story too. Like, and this is where you then jump to the dream and Morpheus is talking to like different bodies or something. Oh, this is where he's mentioning the vortex.
Yeah. This is where he's reminding Matthew the Raven that he has to keep an eye on Rose, and he's working on creating a new nightmare, which is important.
Oh, he's creating a nightmare?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, Dream has to create a nightmare. And the Corinthian was the nightmare, but the Corinthian's gone now.
And that's what escaped.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is where you then see Rose walking in a dark alley and she gets attacked by a bunch of thugs. And I just noticed now as I'm flipping through the panels, one of the guys has a swastika on his back of his shirt.
Yep.
I did not catch that before. And then she gets saved by a guy named Gilbert, which is a big green guy or a big guy in a green coat. References. And Gilbert's the guy that lived upstairs that they mentioned earlier.
And with the fedora and the Inverness cloak, my first thing was like, oh, it's Darkman. Darkman. I mean, obviously, it's not. Gilbert is quite rotund. And he's definitely not Liam Neeson.
And just the part where, like, you see the kid dreaming again, and then all of a sudden, he wakes up because he's getting bit by a rat. Like, in the dream, he gets, he has little things around him. I mean, that was just, I don't know, this stuff hit me hard. Like, I was like, oh, this was hard to read.
Yeah.
Everything with a kid. I didn't, I mean, this story is kind, I mean, like, I like how you had the Raven, like, steals a picture, which again is, because bringing it to Morpheus, which I thought was interesting. Like, he's trying to help him with Jed. Then you get a scene where you see somebody dialing a phone and you see eyeballs next to the phone.
So many eyeballs.
Oh, I was like, again, as I've said this before, I was like, what the fuck did he have me read? And all of a sudden you just see two bodies tied up and they're missing their eyes. Oh God, I was like, this story was hidden.
Yeah, this issue definitely has some of the more brutal stuff of this arc. It's a lot of it's right here. There's some in the next. Well, I guess not the next one. In 2 issues from here.
I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that happens. Like I know Rose and Gilbert joins Rose to go find her brother because I think she has a lead or something.
Yep, and he's sticking with her as in his role as amateur knight errant. So he's basically the muscle on this expedition.
Okay, this is when Morpheus also figures out that the Jed has been cut off from the true dreaming.
By Brute and Glob, yes.
Okay. And this is when he puts on the stupid alien mask again and then leaves. And then we get to issue
12.
How
dare you?
I don't like the mask. I don't. It just reminds me of Alien. So I was really confused when issue 12 starts. So maybe you guys can help me with this, where you see a pregnant lady walking in some place, which I guess is she's in the dream. She's talking about her husband Hector, which is the fake Sandman with Brutus and Glob. Is she somebody of importance or anything? Or is she just a dream too?
As usual, even the smaller characters in Sandman will show up again. And Hippolyta Hall here is going to show up again.
Okay. I was so confusing to see like the little sphere inside like a purple dome or in a purple like world, and they're in this little. I mean, it reminded me of, like the Justice League in space, and I was just really confused. And then it jumps to showing Jed getting his ass beat by these people who adopted him or just using him to get their $800 a month that they talk about in here, and then they lock him in the basement.
That's Jed's aunt and uncle.
Oh, okay. I thought they were just some people who just took him in. I didn't realize it was actually family.
No, that
And
makes
again,
it even worse.
Yeah. Again, like they mentioned his grandfather had died. And so that the grandfather was in the Jack Kirby Sandman series. Like he lived with his grandfather. So it is like, it's fitting sort of into continuity, but they're like, oh, the grandfather's been dead. And now he's living with these folks who are terrible.
God, they're horrible people.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, $800 is not that much money. But maybe
Well,
1989.
now it's not.
No, not at all. Wouldn't even cover.
Yeah.
Wouldn't even cover rent in my old 1-bedroom apartment anymore. But it just, yeah, it's so weird. I mean, it was just so weird. And it really hit me, and like I just, ugh. And then you see, I think Sandman then goes to confront Brutus and Glob, whatever his name is. Is that what was going on here?
Right.
Yeah.
I think because it jumps around a bunch.
Off, yeah, Morpheus is trying to get to Jeb.
Okay.
Because he's very important in the grand scheme of things. That's the one that Matthew brought him the picture of, and he's been cut off from the dreaming. So he's trying to go stop him. And this is where they send out the other Sandman to go fight Morpheus.
Okay. And this is also where you see Roses and Gilbert, the car breaks down, and they head to a hotel for a cereal convention. And I didn't catch this right away. Like, I didn't catch cereal convention. I didn't catch how they didn't want them to stay. They're like, only guests here are allowed to be here. And they're like, we'll stay in our room. We'll behave. And he's like, fine. And none of it clicked. Like, I had no idea where this was going whatsoever until it got there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and again, like this is all fitting into the Bronze Age Sandman, because his thing was he's trying to stop this dream wizard from making nightmares for children. So he thinks he's protecting the child, but actually Dream is like, what are you doing? Like, ridiculous. And he's like, I'm the Sandman. And Dream has a pretty funny scene where he cracks up when he's like, is that what they told you?
Is he a real person, or is he something they created?
So again, like he was a real person, but they've kind of created this dream world that's separate from like Dream's dream world.
Okay.
So as we find out, this isn't even the original Sandman that was doing this. That guy's dead. And the guy who's spoiler for this issue, Hector Hall, also dead.
Okay.
And the really interesting thing that I thought was cool is that right before like Hector and Morpheus get into it, you cut back to Lita like walking down the stairs, and you can kind of see the world's falling apart as Morpheus is coming into contact with Hector, who is living in this area. So this is where Brute and Glob realize, okay, we got caught, we're busted.
And so he leaves. So after Sandman goes and he kind of rescues Jed because he breaks into the house and Jed escapes from the basement, he leaves the girl he took out of the dream, right? And just leaves her there in the house?
Yep.
Okay.
But
and
not
like,
before.
by the way, you're pregnant.
Yeah, you're pregnant, and that kid's mine.
Okay, all right.
And that kid becomes extremely important.
It's definitely, it doesn't make a lot of sense as far as like saying, Dream is always a little unknowable, but here's one scene where you're like, really, dude? Like, that's what you're going to do?
I also didn't catch when the kid leaves and he gets in the car. Like, I had forgotten that this had happened, I think. And the car he gets into is the Corinthian.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't catch that either. Because later on he shows up a little bit later and I was like, how the hell did he get there? Now it makes more sense why he ends up where he does.
Yep.
The Corinthian's fucked up, by the way.
Oh, I love the Corinthians so much.
And isn't like issue 13, so part 4 of this Dollhouse story, isn't it kind of like this is very like a one-off story where it's part of the arc, but it doesn't really feel like it's part of the arc because it has nothing to do with most of it doesn't nothing to do with what's going on. Yeah,
this is an interlude. This is, we've got this very suspenseful scene where he just got picked up by a guy who we know is a serial killer who targets young men. And he just picked up like a 10-year-old boy. So you're like, oh no. And then it's like, we're not going to address that at all. Let's go back to the 14th century and see what's going on there.
I was surprised with this art, or not this art, but this story. Like I was so, like you said, you get dropped in. I'm like, what the hell am I reading? Where it just shows Sandman is at a bar with someone else. Is that supposed to be Death or Desire?
That's Death.
Yeah, okay. She's wearing the little ankh.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch that. I see what you mean now. And this is where this guy talks about you don't have to die if you just choose not to, and this is where they give him immortality, I'm assuming.
Yep.
Okay.
Good old Hobgatling.
He
You
comes back,
will
he does
see
it.
him again.
Yeah. I mean, we see him at the end of this issue, but yes, he's kind of an important character to the greater Sandman story. And this is definitely, I mean, this is a really good story, but this is the kind of story that, like, just as a one-off, you can just, like, hand to your literature professor and be like, see, comics are good.
Yeah, he's talking to Geoffrey Chaucer, and he's talking to Will Shakespeare.
It's cool,
it's very,
though,
like it's very, like, it really wants to hit all the points. But it's a good story. I mean, it sounds like I'm trashing it. I'm not.
Where every 100 years they agree they'll meet, and they keep showing up to the same bar to meet. And I like how their costumes change because the eras have changed, the building has changed, but there's always still a bar in this one spot, which I thought was interesting, and I liked it. I like how you see him go from in some centuries Hob is doing great, in some centuries he's broken down and poor and lost everything, and the costumes keep changing because I really liked it. Like, it was much I was confused, like, what the hell am I reading? Why this all of a sudden this arc here? But it was very cool. Like, there's one part where somebody tries to kill them because they realize that somebody, that every year these weird people meet and talk.
Right.
And then isn't this when he kind of like shows you his power? Like, he pretty much kills them, or he does something very bad to them.
Right. Well,
he basically
and
just
before
puts
that,
them down.
Yeah, he drives them crazy. But before that, there's the scene where, like you mentioned, Will Shakespeare is talking to Kip Marlowe, and he's like, "Oh, if only I could write plays as good as you." And he's like, "Well, you never will. You're a loser who everyone hates." And Sandman's like, "Let me talk to this guy for a second."
And he does, and nobody ever heard of Will Shakespeare again. Oh, wait.
Yeah, I do think, I think it works in this case because Midsummer Night's Dream is such a, like, famous Shakespearean thing, and the idea that, like, he touches this guy and that helps him connect to this dream dimension thing. I think it works okay. I will say Neil Gaiman goes to this well like 1,000% too much. Like, I don't know if y'all have read Eternals that he did for Marvel.
Yeah.
There's a scene where there's a one Eternal that always looks really young, and he's like, I, like, flew around in front of J.M. Barrie, and that's how Peter Pan was created. And I was like, come on, man, stop doing this. Like, it's just every Gaiman book. He's like, and that famous guy also saw this character. Where it's just like, he goes to that well a little too often. I do think it works for Shakespeare. That's the one where I'll be like, okay, that's fine.
And this isn't even the last time Shakespeare shows up in the Sandman run.
No, yeah. The Midsummer Night's Dream issue, I think we covered that for our show. It seems like we may have, but I love that issue. That's a really good one.
It is. It's real fun. But
I'll be reading more Sandman on this show. That's happening 100% because I need to read more. And I think the only other thing, like, the arc, like, I like how they kind of jump around and it shows them, like, in present day they meet again, which I thought was cool, that the guy's still alive, and this time Sandman dressed all, they're meeting in a mall and stuff. I thought that was cool.
And it turns out Dream just really does want a friend.
Yeah, they kind of have a fight in the 1890s or whatever, or 1890, I guess. And then Dream kind of blows up at him because Hobbs like, I think you always want to meet me because you're lonely. And he's like, no, I'm not. I hate you. And then 100 years later, he comes back and is like, oh, we're friends.
That was cute, though.
One of the most important characters in here, though, that we just kind of glossed over was Lady Joanna Constantine.
Oh, that's true.
Oh,
she's the lady that tries to
kill him. Right?
Kill Morpheus, yeah.
And is that, like, supposed to be his grandmother or something for Constantine?
That is a direct descendant of John Constantine, yes.
Okay, I figured it was something like that.
Yes. Yeah, ancestor, right?
Yeah. John is a descendant of Joanna.
Okay, that's cool. I figured that's what they were going for.
Oh, yeah.
I glossed over it.
Not the last time a Constantine will show up.
Right. And Hobb mentions, he's like, I knew her, like, grandfather. Like, I had a weird encounter with, like, ghouls or something. So you're like, okay, so there's another Constantine who's some kind of monster hunter.
Yep, Jack Constantine was before Joanna.
Yep. So he also knows that guy somehow. And he also mentions, who's the other one? He mentions another DC Immortal that he's like, yeah, I've run into that guy a few times.
I don't remember off the top of my head.
I can't remember which one. It's not the caveman Immortal. It was maybe, I don't remember.
I don't either.
But yeah, he's like, yeah, there's other DC Immortals out there, aren't there? And he's like, yes.
So then it jumped back with issue 14 back into the Dollhouse, and this is where so the first page you see, it says welcome to the serial convention, and you just see a bunch of weirdos start showing up, and I did not realize what was happening yet, because they're just coming there, they're talking, you have they all have none of them are going by their real names, they all have just these weird names like Family Man and just odd stuff that didn't really I did not know where this was going at first. Like Nimrod and okay, I didn't even catch some of the stuff that they were there's so many hints, like one of the guys there looks like a sheriff is reading a magazine that says bondage time on it and stuff.
Well, that's just the hotel manager.
Yeah,
that's not one of the weirdos. All right, he's just another weirdo.
Yeah.
But the guy in the glasses,
he's just a regular weirdo.
The guy in the glasses is like a police sketch of somebody famous. Who's he supposed to be? Was it like Zodiac maybe? There's some famous sketch of a serial killer that he's very clearly supposed to be modeled after. I'm not a serial killer guy, so I don't know.
I know a decent amount.
But I think it is interesting that he chose the name Nimrod, which before it was an insult was one of the great hunters from the Bible.
Oh.
Yeah, it's Bugs Bunny is the reason that people think Nimrod means stupid person.
Yep. Stupid bunny.
This is when it shows Rose and Gilbert are at the hotel, and he tells her the weird-ass story about Red Riding Hood for some reason.
Oh, yes. The original Grimm's fairy tale version.
Yeah.
Yikes.
I'm like, okay, that was kind of fucked up, and then it fits everything, and I also like the big fat guy who's sitting at the table, at the serial convention, has a picture of a wolf on his shirt, which again is they're referencing what's going to come up later.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And none of it clicked. They're like, oh, where's our guest of honor, the Family Man, and there's some guy called the Lip Collector, and just none of it was clicking for me right away. Oh, the Candy Man, nothing clicked, and all of a sudden, Crithian shows up. I'm like, wait a second.
What kind of cereal does he have?
I mean, it still didn't click when oh, you were collectors, and I think it was starting to and then it shows you a panel with the American flag and all these different weird faces of people, and it says the collectors. I think that's when it went, oh. I was like, I think I understand what's happening now.
And the reason, there's not Stan Lee chiming in the corner. The reason the Family Man isn't there is because he had just been in a Hellblazer storyline. Because it is a Constantine character, the Family Man.
That's cool. And it also, the next page, when it shows Nimrod, and it talks about Nimrod having a shack in Vermont and cutting somebody up, I'm like, oh. And it's just I think it's interesting too. They're just talking about how they kill people and stuff, and they're just nobody does any collecting during the convention and stuff. It was interesting to me.
It's honestly ridiculous. It is one of the most ridiculous things that there would be something so mundane as a serial killer convention, but at the same time, you kind of got to wonder: are there?
Especially in the 80s and 90s when things were less, we didn't have smartphones, we didn't have it, and the internet was just starting. I mean, it, wouldn't have been something that people wait a second, let's take a picture of this. It wouldn't be the world we live in today. So you could see it. I could see it happening in this time, in this era.
Oh, okay. I mean, I think I'll allow it only because I'm Dream has been gone. This is the DC universe. Things are crazy. But this is, to me, I'm this is a little much. I didn't like this. I get it. It's funny. And it was funny too. They have a film program, and it's also they have Manhunter, the Collector, all this stuff. I'm this is all really easy choices. There's no Last House on the Left or Anthropomagus or whatever it is. There's none of the stuff that I'd be some really out there things. Their film program's pretty meat and potatoes.
It is, but it's all depictions of killers
of
and
serial killers,
glamorizing them. So It's all got to be easy choices. They're not going to play God, what is it? Fade into Black or anything. It's not artsy stuff. This is very much mass marketed portrayals of serial killers in which they're glamorized.
And I like how you have this one random guy that they're talking to who asked for their autograph or something. And they realize that he's not I know he's this guy you find out shortly after he's pretending to be a serial killer, but he's actually a reporter. There's some interesting scenes. Like there's one scene which I didn't catch this at the time, but now it makes sense, where Rose and Gilbert are in an elevator, and then Corinthian gets in the elevator with him, and he covers his face like he might recognize him.
Mm-hmm. And
I
he is
didn't
terrified of the Corinthian.
Because he knows who he is.
Yep. And real quick, before we get too much further, while we're still in the very much meat of it all, I want to say that when I first read this was years ago. I saw the Corinthian and I immediately said, you know what? If they ever do a movie, it's got to be Tom Cruise. Just because of the way he smiled.
Yeah, for a long time, yeah, I could definitely see that.
And then he did the movie Collateral, where he had white hair. And I said, yes, absolutely Tom Cruise has to be the Corinthian.
I forgot about that movie.
Even now, I will still say Tom Cruise as the Corinthian.
I think he might be a little too old now, but yeah, I definitely see that casting. I also like one of these serial killers who's like just one of these like ranting and raving guys. Very clearly looks like he's modeled after Alan Moore.
Oh yeah,
He's just got like a huge crazy beard, and he's like, "I'm a merciful God."
I didn't catch that.
A new life in my head. He's got the X carved in his head, very Charlie Manson, but very much an Alan Moore beard.
Because Gaiman and Moore would have worked together in 20,000 AD in Marvel UK.
Okay. Oh, I see what you mean now. Yeah, that does look like Alan Moore.
And I think the reporter says he's the boogeyman. I think that's a Swamp Thing villain.
Oh.
Yeah, it seems to bring back some memories there.
I've read very, very little Swamp Thing. And it's after, when they're leaving the hotel, Gilbert then gives her the piece of paper that has Morpheus' name on it and tells her if you get in trouble, call his name. Yeah,
if you want more horror to read next year, definitely check it out. That stuff is very upsetting and very good.
Alan Moore's run of Swamp Thing, it's just paramount.
And this is when they throw that reporter in a room and realize, and they kind of tell him that, like, yeah, we know who you are. They knock him out and load him in a car. And this is another fucked up scene where they tie him to a tree and they're all going to take turns murdering him.
Oh, man. Just creepy. I love it.
Mm-hmm. It's fucked up. And they each say which each person is going to do.
Mm-hmm. The doctor likes to skin people. Nimrod's a hunter. He can bone, joint, and gut any animal in minutes. And the Corinthian, well, we know the Corinthian likes eyes.
It's fucked up, but it just gets worse. Like when you see that they're having a disco and Rose ends up trying to walk into the disco, and the big fat guy we saw earlier with the wolf on his shirt stops her, and he says something about, "Oh, you look younger, much younger." I mean, that's also just fucked up too, you know. And because I guess he kills little girls. I'm assuming is what this was referencing. That's what he murders.
He is apparently a serial killer and appears to be a pedophile.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a little messed up, and then you see somebody dead who they're talking about. The different killers there, and you have like the guys driving back in the truck and their shirts are all bloody, the Corinthian them, and then when Rose goes to her room, she sees Gilbert's gone, and at some point, I'm just flipping through the pages right now to see when that, at one point he bursts into her room to kill her, the big fat guy does. I don't remember his name.
Yep. Funland.
Oh,
God.
It's not fun. Don't call him fun. He gets pissed. It's Funland.
Yeah, it reminds me of that video game store, Funko Land. What do you think this is? Funko Land? Yeah, he shows up. He's very bad. And then she says Morpheus's name, which summons him, apparently.
Which I like that. That was cool. And I'm assuming, and then he sends him into a dream. I'm assuming endless sleep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's lost his mind.
Okay. Which I like that. That's what Sandman does, and he rescues her. And then I like how Sandman shows up at the convention and starts talking to Corinthian.
Yeah, he's not happy to see Tom Cruise. I like it too. It's a fun scene because Corinthian's like, let's fight, and he pulls out a knife, and Sandman's just like, no, man, that's not how this works.
We're
not going to shoot laser beams at each other. Like, I'm like this primitive force of consciousness. You can't fight me.
And this is when he takes off the glasses and you just see his eyes are just teeth.
I love it.
Oh,
I love it so much.
And I don't think I caught this the first time, but I know he kills the Corinthian essentially and puts him back in the dream or does whatever he does to him, turns him into a little skull. He ends up driving everyone at the convention mad, doesn't he?
Right.
I didn't catch that, but he just like, because they're all serial killers and he's there, so he just makes them all, crazy. Like they're no longer themselves or anything.
Well, I was gonna say he makes them crazy in the sense that he gives them sort of sanity and reflection on like, this is what you've done and this is what it's all for, and it's worthless. You guys are like all pathetic.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. If you're Asuka, if you're someone in that does this, I think they figured out psychologically that you don't feel remorse, and all of a sudden to give that person remorse would just be terrible for that person. I mean, they deserve it, but I'm assuming that's what happened in this case.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have no remorse. They have no feelings.
But they do now.
And then and then Gilbert shows up and takes Gilbert shows up with Jed, that he found Jed in the trunk of the car. The Corinthian was saving. Oh. So messed up.
So good. Yeah. So good.
Then,
I call I say so messed up. You're like, oh, so good.
Yeah. Now we're on the home stretch, because now we actually figure out what's going on with Rose and all that stuff. This was kind of a diversion.
Because you get the last 2 issues and it goes back. Issue 15 goes back to the house where Rose is, and Rose goes to sleep. And I was super confused when this first happened. I didn't understand what the hell was going on, because all of a sudden it starts showing everybody's dreaming, and they all have some weird dreams, but that's dreams, I guess. And I didn't understand what was going on at all.
Well, here is where Rose comes in, because Rose is the vortex. And I don't remember if it's once a generation or once a certain number of years, a vortex appears, and the vortex breaks down the walls of the dreaming. The vortex is a mortal that has the power to absolutely destroy the realm of the dreaming. And this is why everybody in the house's dreams start combining. Because Rose is there, she's breaking down the boundaries between dreams, and this leads to all sorts of problems.
Yeah, this was a really weird book for me. Like this issue, I was just so confused for a while until they kind of show what's going on, and like I didn't get some of the stuff, like with the cross-dresser, and like the fact that he had Wizard of Oz, and it's the 2 different faces because he's 2 different people, I guess, what they were going for. And just like Barbie's dream, like again, we mentioned earlier, reminds me very much of Narnia, and I was thinking very much of Aslan with the big lion creature she's talking to, and
Martin Tenbones.
It really threw me off until the end of the issue, where it starts making more sense when Morpheus shows up and takes her, like, and she's in this vortex, and they explain what's going on. And again, they do the thing where you'd have to flip the book sideways to read these panels, which I didn't like because I was reading this on a phone. But I thought it was cool, because if I was reading this, in a book form, it would have been just fine. It's very strange.
Yeah, it's funny too. Like Hal's dream is so like, I mean, like that he's got Marilyn Monroe and Betty Davis and Judy Garland. It's like, what's the big secret? It's like, geez, dude, like, come on, like,
he wants to be a star.
Yeah, that's what they're there to tell him.
Yeah,
but yeah, so so she's kind of creating this dream vortex, making all their dreams weirder, and like I said, that's the kind of this what Matthew and Dream were talking about, is that she's sort of attracting all these crazy characters. Although we don't see her friend who's there at the serial killer convention. We don't see any of his dreams.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch that.
Yeah, we don't see anything from Gilbert, because Gilbert's still awake.
Also, Gilbert's not there because he went to go get Jed out of the hospital.
Yeah, well, he went to
go visit him in the hospital. And this is when he meets up with the Raven. And this is also when he figures out Rose is the vortex, and then the last line he says is he's going to have to kill her, and then it says to be concluded in the last issue, right. Which then brings us to issue 16.
Yeah, and Gilbert mentions like, I am Fiddler's Green. That's what I was, and I became a person, which
made no sense to me. And I think, and you find out the Raven, because I had missed that first page, or it didn't click still to me in the first issue where Fiddler's Green is one of the things that he was missing.
Mm-hmm.
Which Dream pointed out in that first issue. He's like, that's I expected from all these other characters, because they're all like bad guys. But Fiddler's Green is like really reliable and good. So this is surprising.
And I think this is also when you find out that the Raven, Matthew, was a person, that then he got turned into a Raven after he died or something.
Matthew's awesome.
That wouldn't be a bad way. I could be a Raven. I'd be okay with that.
Wasn't that in the first series? I can't remember.
I can't remember either.
I feel like they did talk about Matthew in the first one. I'd have to run back and read it.
And he's another Swamp Thing reference. Yeah, I just confirmed. So he was Matthew Cable who is a Swamp Thing character.
I need to read Swamp Thing also. There's so
Guess
many
what we're
books.
doing next Spooktober, Mike.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. We're doing more Sandman before then, but yeah, I'm okay with starting Swamp Thing. I'll eventually finish things. And this is shows Morpheus is in the dream with Rose. He's telling her that he's going to have to kill her to stop the vortex, otherwise she's going to destroy everything. And this is when you find out that Gilbert was the metal. You see the metal. So this kind of threw me for a loop, where her the grandmother, who's been asleep before, ends up entering the dream as a young woman.
Right.
Yes.
Where she was supposed to be the vortex, I guess, but because of the fact that she was sleeping, she didn't become the vortex, is what's happening here.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Unity was supposed to be the vortex, but because Burgess had imprisoned Sandman for all those years, it never happened. So in an attempt to save her granddaughter, she says, hey, look, Rose wasn't supposed to die. I'm supposed to die, and you will take me, not her.
Right. Because she has a line when she first meets Rose. She's like, isn't it funny? Like, I went crazy when I was a little younger than you. So it is like foreshadowed that like she hasn't lived as much of a life as Rose has, because then she got kind of sucked into the sleep sickness. And then we find out, of course, who the father of the kid is. It makes more sense.
Oh, yes. And everything comes back.
And this is when she pulls out a heart, looks like a glass heart, which reminds me of the heart from the first issue of this arc.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But this one's red, and then she puts it inside of her, and then she becomes the vortex, and then he kills her, and you see the scene of her waking up as an old woman and dying, having a heart attack, pretty much.
Yep, just pretty much going. And then Morpheus says, your brother's consciousness is going to return. It's a gift. Your family has suffered enough. And goodbye.
Yeah.
And Morpheus and Rose Walker never met again.
Well, and takes Unity back to the dream world.
Mm-hmm.
And then she wakes up. She's like, oh, what a dream I had. Like, and then she's living with her mom and Jed. And I think it's been 6 months have passed since this has all happened. And I like how there's a newspaper clipping or something that they have that says 6th Lane and Diner of Death Riddle. And I'm like, okay. Which is a reference to the first arc.
Mm-hmm.
It's very cool to see. Like, and you finally, after 6 months, she dyes her hair. She comes out of the house and she's running with Jed. And then you see Morpheus talking to, is this Desire?
Yep.
Yeah.
But Desire looks completely different than Desire that you saw earlier in the beginning of this arc. And also this one reminds me of Catwoman because she's in a cat costume for some reason. And I think I liked all this with Desire. And I think he realized that Desire did all this or something.
Yep.
Right. So
the whole plan.
So the doll's house, which we didn't mention, there was a scene where Unity's like, I'm going to give the doll's house to Rose. Would she like that? And we've seen the little figure in the doll's house. It was Desire. Desire's the one that I guess when she was in a coma, which is really creepy, got her pregnant. I guess not so much a coma as like a waking dream, weird, like not being present. Desire got her pregnant as part of a 60-year scheme, 50-year scheme to try to trick Dream into killing his own family, his I guess, niece, which would cause the Kindly Ones to get him. And
it didn't quite work.
And Dream is like, don't do that again. That's not cool. And then does point out like, hey, like, I know you're like just completely alone and but you don't get that like we're at the mercy of these all the people that are in this world and all this stuff, and that you're just kind of this a tool or a doll or whatever. And Desire's like, no, I'm not like that at all.
Okay.
But then of course Dream reminds Desire that they're not strong enough to stand fully against Dream or Death or Destiny, the three eldest of the Endless. And it's basically it's a warning that, of course, is important.
It's so weird.
Oh,
I do
Desire.
I think I said before, I really do like the fact that Desire in this is male and female. It can be whatever, because that makes sense. And I like that. I think that's cool. Yeah, and it's very, the looking like the Depeche Mode character, or the Cure, or that sort of new wave kind of look a lot of the time, especially when it's an androgynous guy, Desire.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really fun book. And this is, I think it's such an interesting story because Dream is in a lot of ways not a very likable character.
No, not
And
really.
so much of the book is kind of about like Dream, I wouldn't say becoming a person, but sort of becoming a better version of himself, like, whatever you would call like self-actualization or whatever, where he's kind of like looking back at his, even the stuff he's done in the past and he's like, man, I could be a real, because he can be very like, we're just going to do this, very, I guess, regal, where he just makes a decision and he doesn't care like who gets hurt by it or what happens. And so one of the sort of through lines of this, story is kind of how being apart from his dream world has kind of changed him. And, he's kind of going through this whole thing where he's kind of growing, which is, I think, very cool. So you do see him sort of becoming more of, kind of a character at the end of the second arc versus sort of when you see flashbacks before the first arc, before the first volume, where he's kind of a huge asshole.
Yeah, he's gotten too wrapped up in himself as one of the Endless. And part of the reason that I think The Sound of Her Wings was included at the beginning of this is that particular story is considered by a lot of people to be the beginning of Dream exploring his humanity on that journey that he takes with death to understand the fragility of life and what it is to enjoy the time that you have.
Yeah, and like I said, that's the part that I guess reminds me of like Hades, where it's like all about kind of secretly kind of growing up and becoming a better person, even if you're in this sort of loop that seems inescapable, which Dream is clearly in.
Yeah. And like the whole through line of the Sandman series is pretty much Dream's journey. And all the characters that show up in this book, like the main characters, you will see them again. Obviously, Matthew shows up in a lot of books. Lucian, Abel, Rose Walker comes back later. Barbie comes back later. Lyta's son, Daniel, plays an extremely important part in the later stories of Sandman. This lays so much groundwork for the future stories that happen in this series. But at the same time, it's also a very singular thing. We never get another volume like this.
Right. Yeah. This is, it's really, there's so much up that a lot of times it can be very like unsatisfying if you feel like, if you have a whole issue that's nothing but setup. And that first issue at the house kind of was a little bit of, I wouldn't say too much, but there's a lot of setup dumped on you when Rose, which I guess is the second issue of the, where they're actually the doll's house proper. But it never feels like, oh, this is just setting up future stories. Like it's weaving it back and forth. And even like the Hobbs stuff, like that's, like I said, it's an effective, you're creating suspense by waiting 30 days and being like, what's going to happen with the serial, with this kid that got out of the frying pan and into the fire with the serial killers. And then, a month passes and you pick up the next issue of Sandman and it has nothing to do with that. But it's in purpose of a larger story.
And the cool thing about the Hobb thing is that it does kind of show how important death is. So then when you have this story talking about death and how one person shirks it all and his rise and fall throughout the ages, and then immediately cut back to a serial killer convention where all there is death, it's a really great, like, this is, death is really important. And to prove it, here's people that don't take it seriously at all.
Yeah,
like it's really interesting. I love the way they do that. And they'll, like, all of these side stories in Sandman do have a purpose, and it usually has to do with a larger narrative arc within that chunk of collection.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's really, it seems very like facile to be like Sandman good, but it's really incredible. They're like he manages to take so much of like DC continuity of like, oh, you've got Carter Hall, you've got Jack Kirby's Sandman, you've got Swamp Thing, you've got Constantine, and he's clearly like, I want to play in this space where all these characters are, which is kind of the the cool thing about the idea of a shared universe is the idea of like, oh wow, like this is the same world that this guy lives in. So it's very cool to see him do that, and then at the same time have this like over this epic thing that's tying all this stuff together. It's very cool.
And you even get like larger characters too. Like in the first collection, Jonathan Crane shows up, the Scarecrow. Like they continue. It's not just like these smaller one-off like Bronze and Golden Age characters that you see. You know, there are more popular characters that come in later during the stories as well. And Neil Gaiman just kind of pulls from whatever he can. And props to DC really for giving him the ability to just, I'm going to take this and I'm going to take this and I'm going to do something over here. And they were like, yeah, all right, cool. Like you hear it a lot when people are like, oh, you can't make books like this anymore. And I think this is really one where you can't make a book like this anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's, there's so much that they'd be like, oh, we can't touch this, or this upsets our plans we might have for this. But the good thing about it is, because they had done the Crisis on Infinite Earths, DC had a bunch of stuff that was just dead. Like that they were basically like, look, we don't care what happens to Prez, the youngest president. Like this character is over. So when Sandman introduces Perez of all characters for an issue, you're like, what? It's very cool that they do let him, he doesn't do that much with like Superman or Batman, but that's like, to me, I feel like that would just be like a marketing stunt kind of crossover. Like there's no reason for Sandman to meet Batman.
No.
But it's like everything feels like it's in the service of the greater story he's telling when he's like, oh, I can use this stuff from, this horror introduction characters, Cain and Abel. I can use this, Swamp Thing character that died and work them into a bigger thing. Like it's very cool. And like, that's the idea of, like I said, what people love about, and I know there's a lot of like backlash now that there's so many comic book movies. But the cool thing is that, the idea that like, oh, what if Rambo and RoboCop were in the same world, and they ran into each other? Like, that's just a cool idea. Like, you have so much investment in those characters. And so the idea like, oh, they could run into each other? That would be neat. What if aliens and predators were there? Like it's, yeah, I know that didn't turn out into great movies, but it's the idea that, that people have where they're just like, I like both of these things. It would be richer and better for me if the things lived together and everyone could, bounce off each other. Like, I think it's a cool idea. So yeah, like I said, Sandman, thumbs up.
Yeah, and it's not only the DC world that this crosses over into. This crosses over a lot into our history, into the world history. I mean, you get, people like, I don't know, Caesar Augustus shows up.
Right.
And we already talked about Shakespeare and Marlowe and Chaucer showing up, but you get like Marco Polo and Thomas Paine. Like these are real life people that are woven into the world of the dreaming, and they're all storytellers of a sort. It's awesome. I just love it so much.
Any last things to say about this arc before we go to Shelf Stacker Box? I think we covered just about everything.
I feel like we did. Yeah, I feel like we did.
And yeah. I'll start Shelf Stacker Box. So shelf means something you really like. Stack means something you like, but you don't want to put on the shelf. And box means something you dislike. Well, for this, I did enjoy this. It's gonna go in the stack though, because it didn't jump out at me as much as I feel like the first issue did, or the first set. But I still enjoyed it, even though I had no idea what the hell was going on half the time. But that's probably part of the fun of this story. I still really enjoyed it. I'm glad that I finally read it after all this time. That I'm finally, because I looked it up, it was 2019 the last time we did the first Sandman comic. And yeah, so like I said, 2 years ago, and I'm just like, damn, it's been a long time since I read more Sandman. And this really got me to want to read more. Like, I'm definitely going to check out more and do it on the show in the coming months, not 2 years. So let's go in the stack. I'm really glad we read it. God, it was fucked up. I didn't think they didn't top the diner scene because that was more fucked up than the cereal convention, but this was still messed up too. So, but I'm glad I read it. How about you, Kenneth?
Oh, this is absolutely going on my shelf. I don't think anybody who's listened to me talk at all is surprised. This is, I love the Sandman books, but out of all of them, this might be my favorite and the one that I go back to all the time. It's just, I'm quite a fan of the Tom Cruise-ness of the Corinthian. I like the story of Hop Gadling in this. I like the story of Morpheus and Nada. And it's just thematically, this is a very satisfying book for me. Absolutely going to be on my shelf.
Okay. And how about you, Chris?
I agree. I would put it on my shelf. I might stack the Corinthian. I think that character can be a bit too much sometimes. But
yes,
and there is. I mean, this isn't. If you're recommending this to a new reader, like just be aware there's a lot of like upsetting imagery and stuff that I wouldn't give to somebody who's not a teenager. Like mature readers only.
Mm-hmm.
Which I mean, I read this at like 14, which was probably a little too young, but it's fine. That's not what ruined my life. So yeah, but I really like it for all the reasons that have already been talked about. I think that in a way, like, we mentioned there's like a Sandman series coming out and like a whole thing. Like, to me, this is where I would just start. Like, the first volume is fine, but I don't really like it as much. I feel like it leans too much into the horror. There's so much, and I mean, I don't dislike it, but there's so much like kind of setting stuff up. It's kind of an issue 0 that takes a long time to get there, which is a little unfair. I don't think it's completely like a prologue, but this is to me when it really starts getting good is this storyline. So definitely something I would put on my shelf.
Okay. So I'm the odd one out in this case.
Well, we can't always all be right. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mike, you're just not.
And if you enjoyed this and you want to hear our first Sandman episode, comic number 4. You have to scroll through all our entire catalog on Podbean, but it's there if you want to hear what we thought of the first one, which you should. I mean, you can read this without knowing. You can, either way, we spelled everything, doesn't matter, but still read it. And Chris, where can people find you at?
I have a couple of podcasts. I have the comic book club podcast called Some of My Friends Read Comics, where twice a month we go through and talk about we have a long read we do, and then we review a shorter. The idea was always to do kind of classic stuff that maybe one of us hadn't read before, but now it's kind of whatever we want to do because we've been doing it for a long time. And then I also have Your Stupid Minds. It's a bad movie podcast. It's once a month right now. We've got almost 200 episodes of that. So if there is a bad movie that you are interested in, it's pretty evergreen as far as you can go and listen to us make jokes over it and kind of go through it in a funny way as a vehicle for jokes. So I do that with my friend Nick Noble, and I do Some of My Friends Read Comics with Kia and Vince.
And Vince has been on the show at the time you're hearing this should be twice. So.
Yep, and he's been on Your Stupid Minds as well. He did a James Bond episode.
Ooh, which movie did you guys do?
It's so hard to remember James Bond titles. We did the one. It was a Roger Moore James Bond, one that people generally like, but Vince thought it's a little too silly, I think, for him.
That's a bunch of the Roger Moore ones.
Yes, they're all very silly.
Live or Let Die is a good one. I'm more the Sean I know all the Sean Connery ones. I know most of the Roger Moore, but I can't think of all of them offhand. But yeah, there's some odd ones.
You did The Spy Who Loved Me?
See, I was like, I couldn't remember the title, but yeah,
that's a really good movie.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. But yeah, Vince,
I am shocked.
Vince wanted to cover it for our bad movie podcast. Look, we cover lots of movies on our podcast we enjoy, so don't think it's an indictment of the quality of the movie.
Because there's some bad. I mean, if you want to pick one of the bad ones, do like Moonraker or something that's just completely out there. Or
yeah. Like Die Another Day, much worse movie.
You cover the entire Atlas Shrugged trilogy.
Yes. Yeah. So if you want us to talk about politics, we've done God's Not Dead 2, the entire Atlas Shrugged trilogy. We've done a lot of movies that get a little more political, and we are not. We are, again, this is a comedy podcast, so we're not like, well, we agree with this.
Oh
Steve Ditko was right.
And if you want to help out this podcast, for as little as $1, you can go on our Patreon and vote in our Patreon poll that we have each month. I don't know what it is because I'm recording this ahead of time. So go there anyway. There'll be something to vote on, I promise, because I have to do that. So definitely go check that out. And go check out both of Chris's podcasts. You will see a link in the show notes. And want to give a shout out to our awesome intro and outro, courtesy of Bubby, a.k.a. Mike Stoney from ZP Bite the Bullet. Songs the Cool Kid Squad. Definitely go check him out. You see a link in the show notes. And please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and on YouTube. We are on YouTube. No video because I don't do video, but you can hear our voices if you are listening to your podcast on YouTube. We can be found wherever podcasts can be found. If you are trying to find the whole catalog, go to Podbean because other things cut off after 100, and I publish so much stuff. So yeah, go to Podbean. Everything's on Podbean or Podcast Addict. Or one of the other ones, you'll find all our back catalog if you're wondering why stuff is missing from a certain point. Some people message me and say, why can't I find this? Yeah, because I publish too much. So that's why. So definitely go do that. And I think that's everything I need to say. So we will see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.
Sleep well.